South Africa has in recent years faced challenges in politics and society, which many attribute to leaders' lack of morals. The endemic corruption in government and the private sector has eroded public confidence. This has unfortunately led to a trust deficit between government, public representatives, as well as citizens. Joining us to unpack this a little bit further, with the chairperson of the Moral Regeneration Movement, Smangaliso Mkhatshwa, joining us on the line, as well as a founding member of Defend Our Democracy campaign, Mavuso Msimang. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Maybe before we get into that conversation in earnest, of course, we are on Workers' Day, one that is certainly not without its events. So we've seen what happened yesterday as far as the booing of the leadership of the country, not being allowed to address workers. And maybe let's just reflect on that. Father Mkhatshwa, let's start with you. Do we value the creative value of work as South African? I'm talking here the leadership and its contribution as far as a developmental state is concerned?
Well, thank you very much, Thabo. Well, first of all, what many people don't recognize is that workers are the ones who actually produce the wealth of the country. Workers are the ones who ensure that ordinary citizens have bread on the table, that they have opportunities to ensure that there are health services, education services. Those are the people who ensure also that we are able to enjoy the basic services, or that we all enjoy as citizens. And finally, to say that for me, for democracy to work the way it should, the role of the working class is very important. And yesterday, and before that, of course, obviously, millions of people, of workers around the world, they march, they express their dissatisfaction and so on. But what for me is most important is that if we look at our own situation in South Africa, is that one, we speak a lot about the developmental state. That is a nice dream, but without workers that are well qualified, equipped, that have the necessary educational, scientific skills, that dream remains just an empty dream and so on. And that's why for my opportunity that I'm taking this evening is to congratulate the workers, to salute them, but also to say that they must never forget that if this democracy is really to work, they have a very important and responsible role to play. And finally, just to say, Thabo, in my opinion, what the workers are asking for is not anything. They don't want to be millionaires. They don't want to have, I don't know, all what the Mutsipes of this world own and so on, or Oppenheimers and so on. They're merely saying, let us have bread on the table for our children. Let us be able to pay school fees for our children. Let us ensure that we've got electricity, we've got water, we've got the basic requirements. That's what they're asking for.
Yeah, indeed. But Msimang, I mean, the circumstances surrounding the incidents of yesterday, some of them are known, some of them, of course, they are still to be known and who the players are. But however, what we are hearing coming from the workers themselves is that we do not value the role, and by we I mean the South African government in particular, of the working class in this democracy. What's your reflection?
Well, first of all, congratulations on your anniversary. You are indeed a first-rate television station, great producers, and great also TV journalists. Congratulations, and congratulations to the workers on their Workers' Day. It's not easy there are problems that are happening in this country, problems of leadership, politically and across the board. I think the strike has been ongoing for some time. And I just heard Gwede Mantashe before coming in. I came in here explaining what is now taking place. Strictly speaking, really, this is a problem that ought to be resolved at a technical level between the employer and the unions or representing the employers. Yeah. I think something has not been working very well in this particular case. And I don't want to infer from this other than confirming generally that we have a problem of leadership in the country as a result of all the things that we've seen. Yeah.
But I mean, if we reflect on the sentiment itself, I suppose segueing into the conversation that we are having tonight, there is a general trust deficit, whether be it workers in the mining sector or workers in many other sectors, or be it citizenry in general when it comes to leadership in the country, political leadership in government, that these people are actually looking out for our good. What is behind this decimation and the deterioration of trust, right? So much so that they announced now recently with the floods in KwaZulu-Natal that there will be R1 billion released. The one thing that was a conversation on the top of mind of the citizens is the leaders must not steal the money. I mean, that in itself tells you the degree of the trust deficit in the country. Is this a matter of moral degeneration in our leadership, Mavuso Msimang?
Well, there is no doubt at all that the trust deficit exists, and it is fully justified. When you look at what's been happening over the many years, a decade now, and when the administration of President Zuma left office, there was a really great hope that issues would be resolved. The problem has proved a lot more complex or more difficult than what people had expected. You know, we've just had the fourth installment of the Zondo Commission report. It's damning on the leadership of this country, and in particular with the last installment on the leadership of the African National Congress, which happens to be the government of the country. So with those kinds of accusations coming out of disclosures coming out of the Zondo report, indeed, when you think about what happened when we had the emergency, the COVID emergency, it's still with us, and people really, and not just ordinary people, leadership, people in the leadership, stealing resources that were supposed to be given to the people. And all the things that are taking place, that really it shouldn't surprise us that people have lost confidence in the leadership. It's going to be a very high mountain to climb by the leadership, certainly of the ANC, to restore this leadership. It should have been done. I think stronger attempts should have been made earlier, and there was an aversion to risk. The result being that the situation deteriorated is going to be a lot more difficult now to regain the trust of the people. But there has to be an effort to do that, otherwise we're in trouble.
Mkhatshwa, your analysis, I mean, you were speaking earlier on of if this democracy is really to work. 28 years on, is this democracy really working if the first thing that the citizen thinks about when relief funds are announced is that the money is going to be stolen? It's almost as if it's a foregone conclusion that the money will be stolen.
Well, let me link this to my one or two comments I would like to make and address specifically to the leadership of workers. One, is that I'm a little bit concerned that since 1994 up to now, the power, the influence of organized labor seems to have waned quite a lot. All right, I quite understand people are fighting over membership and what have you and so on. But I'm looking at the principle that workers, as a matter of fact, are supposed to be the fulcrum of democracy and a democratic government. That's number one. Number two, I'm actually very concerned that the role that the working class, organized working class, used to play is no longer as powerful as it was and as it should be, because our revolution has not attained its final ambitions as yet. And therefore the role of organized workers remains for me very, very, very crucial. And I also want to make the point, Thabo, that in my opinion, maybe we have also as a country, even as government to some extent, we've also let down the working class. Maybe we could have shown them much more support in various ways, especially in terms, if I can give two examples. One, to change, to amend the education system in such a way that it does not just produce people who can speak good English and so on, but people with skills and people who can actually participate actively in a highly industrialized society that South Africa is. Because as it is at the moment, there are lots of jobs I see that are advertised, and yet many of our workers, especially the young ones, are unable to access those because they don't have the industrial skills that are required.
Yeah.
And therefore, for me, it's important for government to be able to say one way of supporting the working class, of ensuring, of fighting unemployment, is to ensure that our education system meets the demands of today's society.
Yeah. But in this long list of what we would need to achieve, Father Mkhatshwa, at the heart of it is that we need a leadership that we can trust. Has South Africa completely lost its capacity to put the correct leadership in place that can be trusted?
You know, Thabo, what I want to say right away is that the role for me of the working class, leadership or workers generally speaking, is to ensure that they fight corruption. They make sure that political leadership is not allowed to steal resources, monies that are meant especially to support the most disadvantaged, the poorest people. In this particular instance, people dying of COVID-19 illnesses and so on. What has happened in KZN at the moment? And for me, it's not only embarrassing, it's a huge indictment that many people out there are actually saying, let's rather trust, what do you call these people? It's an NGO. Let us rather trust those people to administer the funds, the financial assistance that is earmarked for the victims of those, of those floods and so on, rather than government people. For me, it makes me extremely uncomfortable because government should actually be the one that people have the most confidence and trust in.
Yeah. Msimang, is this a worsening situation as far as the role of leadership in fighting lawlessness and corruption? Is leadership taking a leading role and leading by example, right? You mentioned earlier on the release of Part 4 of the Zondo Commission. There's part 5 also still on the way. Are we seeing leadership playing a leading role to say, let us fight this thing? Because clearly, by the looks of things, it's endemic. It was within the structures of the organization and how the organization worked.
I think it's a tough one, Thabo, when you think that with all the things that have been said, the findings of the Zondo Commission, names being named about who's done what wrongly, and the fact that up to today no one has as yet, no significant person has been arrested, does not inspire confidence. That's one of the reasons. The second one is these things do continue. You're asking if the situation is deteriorating. I'm not sure that it is improving. All the time you expect something, a scandal, to take place. So I just think that much harder work needs to be done. On these things, one must talk about the government, and it's the government of the ANC. I've seen the president taking certain measures that show his determination. He's talked about it, but of late I did appreciate that he's taken measures together with his NEC that indicate that they will have no truck anymore with people who are not ethical, people who are corrupt. You have the instances of the instance of people in Durban, and in Mpumalanga, where people who had been asked to step aside and had actually stepped aside, came back and contested positions. This raises two questions. What do they as individuals, what ethical values do they attach to their office? You know, you hear people talking about we're bound by the Constitution and we're not guilty, we're innocent until found guilty. This is, of course, rubbish, because an organization has got its own rules which are apart from the legal things that say if you've stolen, you're going to go to jail. Right. You step down in a SAFA, in a church organization, and your stepping down is motivated by the interest of the organization. If you can't do it yourself, then your fellow leaders must ensure that you are removed. It's been very difficult to do that.
Yeah. I'm going to come in a moment. I want you to tell me why it's been so difficult to do it. Let's take a break. We'll come back and continue. Chairperson of the Moral Regeneration Movement, Father Smangaliso Mkhatshwa, staying on, as well as the founding member of Defend Our Democracy campaign, Mavuso Msimang. Question really asking us, where is the heavy lifting going to be coming from if indeed the individuals in leadership will not voluntarily step down by themselves when they are covered in a dark cloud? Because the death, decline, decimation of morality in leadership under focus tonight as we look broadly even in the leadership of the working class. Chairperson of the Moral Regeneration Movement, Father Smangaliso Mkhatshwa, still on, and the founding member of Defend Our Democracy campaign, Mavuso Msimang. Msimang, let me come back to you. You're saying it's been difficult. Why has it been so difficult to say leaders who are in a court case step down, and they step down, and in fact they step down for themselves? And therefore, what does that tell us about where the heavy lifting is going to be coming from? I mean, Father Mkhatshwa was talking now, but people are saying it's better to have an NGO distribute these funds than actually have government officials do that. Is that where the heavy lifting is going to be coming from people who actually don't even have government power?
Well, in the first instance, the people who, they are called leaders because they are expected to take leadership in dealing with these matters. There has been a lot of hesitancy up to now. The people have talked about corruption and talked about what's not liked, how it's bad and all of that. But there's been no concrete action that says corruption, any corrupt people cannot live among us. When that takes place, I was referring to the recent announcement we heard that the NEC of the African National Congress decided that people who have been tainted, including those who made themselves available and were elected, should not come in. It's a good step forward. We also need to come to a point where the factionalism, which is partly what leaders use in order to keep themselves in office, is managed and removed. How do ordinary members of a party vote into office a person with a scandalous record? One is accused of murder, another is accused of very, very many crimes of theft. What kind of people decide that it is okay to vote people like that into office? So they value their personal interests. All I can say is that you can only do that really if you're not quite sound of mind, or there is something that you hope to gain of a material, financial value, which means that these people have lost contact completely, have lost their relationship with the community that their organizations was set up and said it should be voted into office in order to serve. They are interested in their own benefits, and it doesn't matter what the population thinks. So the heavy lifting will have to come if people hope to continue in government. I'm a member of Defend Our Democracy. I don't think we've given up, but we are cognizant of the fact that those in political leadership have in very many respects let the nation down. And we're saying to the people, listen, find ways of defending democracy yourselves. Normally, democracy is upheld, is exercised through the election of people. They elect people, and people don't provide the services that they promised the people they would do. So there must be a new way found, and this is really what people must be thinking of defending this thing, defending their own rights, because those who are in government have simply let them down.
Father Mkhatshwa, speaking of a new way, I mean, unless some kind of political miracle happened, from the optics, organizations like yourselves, the Moral Regeneration Organization, and the approaches that you are taking are not currently being emboldened. What are the reasons behind that?
Talbot, you want me to tell me a story, which was going to last for a couple of seconds. When I was president of the United Nations Local Government Association, I met a friend of mine in Nigeria, and that was soon after we had attained our freedom. And of course, I was very boastful, we South Africans and so on, you can imagine. So he says to me, let me congratulate you South Africans, because what you have achieved is good for Africa's image as a whole, internationally. But please let me tell you one thing. I don't know when it's going to happen, but after some time, you South Africans were so clean, so absolutely wonderful, and so you'll be as rotten as ourselves in Nigeria. Now, I don't want to meet that guy today because I don't know how I'm going to explain where we are today. So I thought that would be interesting. So, in other words, to summarize where we are today. But let me also just say that I think I want to really endorse, by and large, what this comrade, the panelist has also said, that I think we have a huge problem. And for me, what exacerbated the problem and highlighted it more than anything else was the theft of resources that were meant for the healthcare workers to save the lives of COVID-19 victims. Number two, for me, what made this situation actually very, very, very serious was the way in which we can live with ourselves when people in KZN are being washed away, are dying, their resources, their houses and everything else are being washed away and so on, and that we can steal the money, the resources that are meant to not only rescue those people, but at least to save them from life, so that at least they have a fighting chance to survive. Now, for me, what that means, that there's no conscience that's left. It means we've reached a stage when we are so absolutely arrogant that we don't really care a damn about what happens to other people, except to serve ourselves, our interests, and those of our own close comrades. That, for me, is the biggest indictment, and I'm not saying everybody is like that, but it's just that the Zondo Commission and other information that has come our way tend to confirm, unfortunately, lots of these allegations and worries.
Yeah, indeed. Bob, we appreciate your time, Father Mkhatshwa. Thank you very much for coming on, Bob Msimang, and thank you very much for your time. Fortunately, we're out of time. We leave it there for tonight.